Hi everyone! In this section, we will look into one of the most important aspects in research methodology, which is to review journal articles. It is important for an engineering graduates to have good grasp in reviewing and writing journal review articles. The main and fundamental purpose of writing a review is to create a readable synthesis of the best resources available in the literature for an important research question or a current area of research. Good research questions are essential to the research process. By defining exactly what the researcher is trying to find out, these questions influence most of the rest of the steps taken to conduct the research. Let's have a look on the techniques used in reviewing journal articles. In general, there are two types of scientific articles, which are research articles and review articles. These are the examples of research article and review articles. This is an example of a review paper on transmit array antennas, while this one is a research paper on a low-profile transmit array antennas with Cassegrain reflect array feed. Note that there are slight differences in the paper formatting. A research paper tends to contain more segments compared to a review paper. And a review paper typically will have a numerous of references. A research article lays a brief background on prior research that motivated the present study, and it presents original research data. Sections included are introductions, methodology, results, and discussion. It typically contains field-specific jargons. On the other hand, a review article has an extensive survey and summarized present research. There is no original research data being presented. The sections typically are divided into introduction, comparisons, and discussions, and it is typically written for more general audience. Elements of a research paper includes a title that summarizes the main idea or ideas of the study. A good title contains the fewest possible words that adequately describe the content and purpose of the research paper. The title is without doubt the part of a paper that is read the most and is usually read first. Secondly is an abstract, which contains a summary of the research conducted and the results found, followed by introductions. The third element is the introduction. Introduction introduces the topic and the researcher's hypothesis. These include a literature review of previous research in this area. These can often be useful for pointing you towards additional articles relevant to the topic. Always seek out for the original articles rather than citing the other author's citations. And this is followed by methodology, in which methodology describes the methods and materials, as well as it describes how the research was conducted, particularly relevant to the other researchers interested in replicating the experiment. Another aspect of a research paper is the analysis or the research outcomes. Here, the results are described and discussed. The outcome of the experiments. This will typically include statistical data often presented in charts or tables. And finally, conclusion and also discussion. This is where the authors interpret the results. The discussions will place the researcher's findings in the context of the previous research discussed in the introduction. It will also provide ideas for future research and discuss any limitations to the studies described in the article. And finally, the references. This is where credible and reliable resources is being listed. Now, let's move on to what to look for when you review a research article. A typical abstract will contain an information regarding the system, the problems, methods, and also achievement. Read the abstract and introduction carefully. Find answers for the following question. What is the system the research is talking about? System can be divided into subsystems and specific systems. Secondly, what problem is the paper trying to solve? What are the limitations of prior work? What are the proposed methods or techniques used in this research? How does this paper solve the problem? And what is the paper's contribution? And finally, look into how is the proposed solution were evaluated, what kind of data or experiments were conducted, and what were the achievements. Now, let's move on into the introduction. Introduction contains the hypothesis, literature review, and research question, which mainly basically try to address the what and why questions. What are the motivations for this work? Generally, there are two types of problems. The first one, people problem. The people problem is the benefit that are desired in the world at large. For example, some issues of quality of life, such as save time or increase safety. Secondly is the technical problem, which is why doesn't the people problem have a trivial solution? What are the previous solutions? And why are they inadequate? Finally, the motivation and statement of the problem are distilled into a research question that can be addressed within the confines of the particular paper. Oftentimes, one or more of these elements are not explicitly stated, making your job much difficult. But it's okay, read as many times as possible to find the following answers. Next, let's move on to the methodology. In methodology, techniques, system, model, experiment setup is being discussed, mainly answering the how questions. What is the proposed solution in this paper? This is also called the hypothesis idea. There should also be an answer to the question, why is it believed that this solution will work and be better than previous solution? There should also be a discussion about how the solution is achieved, designed and implemented, or is at least achievable. What is the work's evaluation of the proposed solution? An idea alone is usually not adequate for publication of a research paper. This is the concrete engagement of the research question. What argument, implementation, and/or experiment makes the case of the value of the ideas? What benefits or problems that are identified? Next, let's move on into analysis. Here, typically, the research outcomes is revisited and discussed, mainly answering the why and how questions. What is your analysis of the identified problem and evaluation? Is this a good idea? What flaw do you perceive in the work? What are the most interesting points made? For work that has practical implications, you also want to ask, is this really going to work? Who would want it? What it will take to give it to them? And when might it become a reality? In the discussion and conclusion, you should focus on answering this question. Does the experiment answer the research question proposed in the introduction? Basically trying to address so what situation. Here, the aim is to find what are the contributions of the work. The contributions in a paper may be many and varied. Beyond the insight of the research question, ideas, software, experimental techniques, or an area survey can be discussed. What are the future directions for this research? Well, not only what future direction do the authors identify, but also what ideas did you come up with while reading the paper. Sometimes these may be identified as shortcomings or other critiques of the current work. Finally is the overall review. What questions are you left with when reading this paper? What questions would you like to raise in an open discussion of the work? What do you find confusing or difficult to understand from the paper? By taking the time to list several, you will be forced to think more deeply about the work. What is your takeaway message from the paper? Sum up the main implication of the paper from your perspective. This is useful for very quick review and refreshing your memory. It also forces you to try to identify the essence of the work. Now, let's do an exercise. Let's identify the following article. Is it a review or is it a summary? The following article is about Maleficent. It is a very well-known Angelina Jolie's movie. Let's spend some time to read Article 1 and Article 2. Now, let's identify, is Article 1 a review or is it a summary? Whereas, is Article 2 a review or is it a summary? Remember, reviewing an article is not a re-narrating, but rather criticizing the content. Hence, looking at these two articles, Article number 2 is a review, whereas Article number 1 is a summary. Here is some of the best practices in journal article review. First is to find the right article, followed by a systematic note-taking and keeping, and idea representation. You can find the right article with reliable resources such as IEEE Explore, Springer, Mendeley, Elsevier, and Google Scholar. And remember to use right keywords such as Boolean and or. Secondly is to practice a systematic note-taking and keeping, such as having a systematic logbook and the use of reference managers such as Mendeley or EndNote. A systematic logbook typically contains the paper properties such as the title, author, dates, and sources, followed by the content, which are the system, problems, previous work, methodology, and achievements that were discussed in the paper. Note that methodology typically lists the design parameters, whereas the achievement discusses on the performance parameters. Finally, for each paper reviewed, write down a summary and also a critical review. This is a quick note to refresh your memory about the paper. Finally is best practice in idea representation. You can develop a knowledge chart, for example, and keep practicing. Writing with KISS. Keep it simple and short. Resources for the research methodology can be retrieved via my YouTube channel. You can go to Nurul Hazlina and go to playlist research methodology. From time to time, I will update announcement via my blog, and the resources to download the paper can be retrieved via library easyproxy.ump.edu.my. Remember to submit all the assignments relating to research methodology in kalam.ump.edu.my. With that, thank you.